Is it possible to remember a movie being better than it was, all because of one line? Alright everybody, today we're going back all the way to 1983 to look at a classic everybody knows, everybody remembers, everybody loves. Was it as good as some of the others? We'll get to that. We are talking about Sudden Impact. But before we go any further, before we dive into this anymore, once again, and as always, to the trailer.
Dirty Harry is at it again in Sudden Impact.
What you doing, you pig-head sucker?
You boys, put those guns down.
Say what?
We're not just gonna let you walk out of here.
Who's we, sucker?
Smith, Weston, and me. Go ahead. Make my day. My day.
Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry, Sudden Impact.
Okay everybody, this motion picture was directed by Clint Eastwood. We all know that, so let's just run through the numbers of stuff he's done before. We're talking about High Plains Drifter. We're talking about Outlaw Josie Wales and Firefox and Pale Rider and Bronco Billy and The Gauntlet, which is just my shit, and Heartbreak Ridge, and Unforgiven, and Space Cowboys, and A Perfect World, and $1 Million Baby, and Gran Torino, and American Sniper, and Bridges of Madison County, and etc., 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 etc. His career as a director, obviously, is just as big as his career as an actor. It's just the way it is. He's going to be a legend on both fronts. There you go. Okay. There are so many names and faces in this that I am not going to do the traditional 3 or 4 people and give you a whole bunch of shit that each one was in. I'm just going to do a really fast run through of a lot of the names with a couple of the things they were in. We're just going to kind of like bulldoze right through that and then get to the story. So without further ado, let's roll. Of course you got Clint Eastwood as Dirty Harry. You know, obviously, Dirty Harry, Pale Rider, Unforgiven. You got Sondra Locke, come on, The Gauntlet, Bronco Billy, Every Which Way But Loose. You got Pat Hingle, Maximum Overdrive, The Gauntlet itself, and Batman. You got Bradford, Dillman, Piranha, The Enforcer, The Swarm. Come on. You got Paul Drake, you know, The Fall Guy, Hill Street Blues, MacGyver. You got Audrie, Neenan, Doctor, Law and Order, Night Court. You got Albert Popwell. He was in every Dirty freaking Harry movie there was. We're talking Dirty Harry, The Enforcer, Magnum Force. And you got Michael Currie, Halloween 3, The Philadelphia Experiment, Firefox. You got Nancy Parsons. Everybody knows the face. Porky's, Motel Hell, Steel Magnolias. You got one of the greatest, most beautiful women ever created in the history of mankind playing the waitress, Maurer Corday. You shitting me? No, I'm not. You got Russ McCubbin, and he was on Daniel Boone and Wild Wild West and Laredo. And you got Robert Sutton, Starsky and Hutch, Kojak, Rockford Files. There is a plethora of... I hope I didn't pronounce anybody's names wrong when I'm running like this, so it is what it is. Anyway, there's a plethora of people in this, a whole bunch of names, a whole bunch of faces you've seen in other Clint Eastwood movies. So, it is what it was. They're all there. Let's keep moving. Alright, I'm going to try to do this in 90 seconds or less so I can keep it short, keep it fast, keep it entertaining, keep it moving so we can get to where we'd much rather be. The summation. I really don't know if I'm going to cover this in 90 seconds or less, but Damn it, I'll try. The motion picture starts out on a hillside in San Francisco, and you have this woman in a car, and she's making out with this dude. Next thing you know, she pulls out a gun, she shoots him in the little head, she shoots him in the big head, she leaves him for dead. She walks out of the car, she looks down over the San Francisco Bay, and she says, wow, whoa, what did I just do? Cut to a couple seconds later, you got one Harry Callahan, late for court, as he is one to be. And he walks in, and there's these guys that he has arrested for something, and the judge, as we've seen in every Dirty Harry movie, says, oh, you got this evidence without following the rules, without keeping the tradition of the law, blah, blah, we're going to let this guy, who's obviously a criminal, go free. Well, they leave. Him and Eastwood have a couple words in an elevator where Clint calls him dog shit, says he's going to do some shit to him sooner or later, whatever. You get the idea. That moves on. Next thing you know, the Eastwood / Callahan pulls up to this restaurant, diner actually, and orders himself a coffee where the waitress keeps putting in amazing amounts of sugars. But something ain't right. Something seems a little off. Why? They're being robbed! And the sugar was a tip-off to Eastwood to say, hey, something's wrong in here. Next thing you know, he shows in through the back door and says, we're not going to let you walk out of here. They're like, who's we, sucker? And he says, Smith, Wesson, and me. And he starts blowing people away left and right. And that's where you get the quintessential tagline of the 1980s, one of the most known, one of the most recognized, go ahead, make my day. Well, they take that guy away. End of scene. But our boy Harry ain't done for the day. Next thing you know, he shows up at a mobster's wedding. Well, the kid's wedding, the mobster's just there, take it for what it is. He goes in, he says, hey, I got some evidence against you about torturing a hooker, ha 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 ha. And he brings his stuff up in front of the guy's family, but he really didn't have any evidence. He was just rattling the nest. Next thing you know, the old man has a heart attack and falls dead in the middle of the wedding party. It is what it is. Harry's just doing what he does. Next thing you know, it's the next morning, and now Clint Eastwood is there with his buddy eating a hot dog, and they are investigating the crime scene of the guy that caught one in the cap and one in the pecker, and they're like, hey, this is kind of weird. But up from the hill, Sondra Locke is watching down. She's seeing what's going on. It is what it is. Next thing you know, Clint's in the office getting yelled at by his superiors again for giving an old man a heart attack, and they're saying, you need to take some time off because the mob's going to try to kill you. He's like, I'm not due for vacation. They're like, no, you're going to have to take some time off, dude. You've really rattled some mess. Meanwhile, Sondra Locke goes and visits her sister. Her and her sister went through a traumatic event, and, you get the idea. That's why you're going to find out why she's killing all these dudes. And they had been assaulted by these guys. You get the idea. We'll get back to that. Anyway, she goes and visits her sister and tells her she killed the very first one of those guys. And probably going to be killing some more. It is what it is. Sister sheds a tear down her face. Sondra Locke takes off to go do some more killing. It is what it goes. Next thing you know, it's later that day. And what else happens in the day of Clint Eastwood? He gets attacked by a bunch of gangsters looking for revenge for that old man that he gave a heart attack. Woo woo! They're chasing him around this one area. He's running upstairs, downstairs. Next thing you know, he airs out a few gangsters, but one of them gets away. It is what it is. Happens all the time in Clint Eastwood land. Well, so the day goes on. He's hanging out at the range or someplace in the woods, and he's testing the auto mag. And this guy comes up behind him that we've seen in 8,000 Dirty Harry movies. But they're friends in this one, so they laugh, they joke, they bust off some rounds. He says this is the most incredible gun in the world, and he's like, I got a shotgun. It is what it is, take it from what you want. Next thing you know, the very kids that Clint Eastwood was dealing with in court in the beginning come back to try to beat him up with lead pipes and Molotov cocktails. Well, that doesn't go so well when you screw with Harry Callahan. You tend to die when you do that. So they all die. It is what it is. Cops are like, dude, Harry, it's been like 3 days. You've killed like 9 people. You got to slow down. It's a busy week, even for you. You have to get out of town. We got this thing going on. We want you to keep investigating the guy that got his pecker blown off. We're going to sip you over to this direction and get you off of these cases. And you can go play around there and stay the hell out of everything that's going on here. But he isn't in that area for more than 3 seconds, and he stops another robbery while driving a bus full of old people around as the guy's taken off on a stolen tricycle police thing, whatever. And who the hell does the arrest come right in front of? One Sondra Locke. The chick that's capping people in the balls. It is what it is. The police chief in that area, he really doesn't like the fact that Clint Eastwood has shown up. He doesn't like the fact that he's there. He doesn't like the fact that he's done this big robbery stoppage within 3 seconds of being in town. Kind of gives Harry a hard time. Harry takes off, goes home, to an apartment, and finds out that his friend Horace, the guy with the shotgun that was at the range earlier, had given him a big bulldog. Is what it was. Next thing you know, the bulldog and Harry are going for a jog. And who does he bump into again? Go figure. One Sondra Locke. They exchange some words, they move on, they do their thing. It is what it is. You get the idea. Harry wants to do some investigating, so he goes to this bar where some of these people hung out that are losing their dicks. Next thing you know, he bumps into Ray, this red-haired chick who's like, really tough and hangs out with this group of psychos. And she wants to get laid, so she goes up to him. Eastwood kicks her in the ass. She laughs. He tells her, hey, your buddy's dead. She laughs even harder. Everybody laughs. Eastwood's like, these people are fucking weird, and I am out of here. Next thing you know, Sondra Locke, she ain't done for the day. She shows up on the beach where there's another guy that did some bad things to her and her sister. And he's fishing, and he's smoking, and he's looking at nudie magazines. And she walks up, and guess what she does? That's right, she pops him in the pecker, she plants one in the face. She's getting to be a professional at this shit by this stage of the game, is what it is. In the middle of all that, Ray is warning one of the others, hey man, I think somebody's killing all of us that were there that night. I think she's back. And he's like, oh, get out of here. It doesn't make a difference. You need to take off. And she's like, I'm telling you, I'm calling our psycho leader. And he's like, you keep that psycho away from me. Basically, that's just that conversation. Next thing you know, Clint Eastwood is in the sheriff's office, and he's like, son of a bitch, that picture on the sheriff's wall. Everybody who's dying is in that fucking picture. There must be some kind of a connection. What is going on? At that very moment, Sondra Locke decides she's going to go take the guy that Ray was just talking to, the store owner, who was one of those guys, and she's going to shoot him in the dick and in the head. And, well, she's got a hell of a track record going at this point. So, Clint Eastwood goes over, and he's going to go and arrest Ray and the other bad psychopath that just showed up, blah, 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 the one that was out of town. He's going over to ask him questions, actually, but it turns into a thing because they get into a fight. But while he's going into there, he sees a car in the driveway. Whose car is it? It's Sondra Locke's car. How does he know? Because they run the plates. What is she doing there? She's going in to kill him. Does Clint see her? No, he doesn't. So he just grabs the guy and leaves, and Ray is mad that her potential sex buddy is getting taken off. But as soon as they leave, Sondra walks in and says, ha, 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 you remember me? Pops one in her chest, pops one in her head. I mean, she doesn't have a dick, so she couldn't shoot her there. Take it for what it's worth. But you get the idea. The story keeps moving. Meanwhile, the bad guy that was, just arrested by Clint Eastwood gets let out of jail. As Sondra Locke goes over to finish off the final guy, it happens to be the sheriff's son. You find out that the sheriff's son was one of the kids that did the bad things to Sondra Locke and her sister, but he couldn't handle it. He had guilt. He couldn't handle what he had done, like the other people did, and just laughed it off. So he tried to kill himself, and he left himself a vegetable. So she goes there to kill him and sees he's a vegetable. And the father explains it all and says, basically, I'm going to come clean. I get it. We were wrong. Blah, 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 blah. I should have protected my son. I should have protected those scumbags. They're in my jail. Don't worry. But guess what? They're not in the jail. They come walking in. They kill the sheriff. They kidnap Sondra Locke. They take her to the pier to do bad things to her again. Except, who shows up? One, Harold. Friggin' Callahan, who's very upset because actually before that he found out that those boys had killed his boy Horace and threw him a little bit of a beating, pitching him over the pier into the water, but he got out. Now he's alive. He's got his auto mag. He's pissed off, and they kicked his fucking dog. They kicked his dog because the dog is limping, and that was the breaking point. And he has now showed up to rescue Sondra Locke, to dust off these bad guys, and to wrap up this motion picture. That's about it, folks. Sudden Impact in a nutshell. Let's get to the summation. Okay, everybody. Does Sudden Impact work? Well, yes, it works. Obviously, it works. It was a huge, huge monstrous success. I think up to that point, it was the largest grossing Dirty Harry movie of all time. But is it really as great as the others? Maybe equal to some? Maybe pales in comparison to the original? That's what we're here to look at. But before we get into that, let's get the big three out of the way. The directing. Okay, I'm going to say something not very popular here. I don't think this is a well-directed Eastwood flick. I love Eastwood as a director. I truly, honestly do. I just don't think this one has the feel and look and vibe of a traditional Eastwood movie. Eastwood works best when he's working at a certain pace. It's a kind of even pace, and then he breaks into action, even pace, breaks into action, but even the action has a pace. Think of Pale Rider. Think of Unforgiven. Think of The Gauntlet. This motion picture is just running through such action scene after action scene after action scene after action scene. You're kind of like, it just doesn't feel right. There's the one scene where he's doing the chase with the van, and the guy's on the stolen motorcycle, tricycle fucking thing, It actually feels more like you're watching something taking place at like Universal Studios, where you're watching the stunt team put on a show for you. It just didn't feel right. Is it directed badly? No. But is it up to the standards that you or I would expect from Clint Eastwood when he's directing a major motion picture? Not quite. I hate to say it, but that's just the way I feel. The writing, well, it's solid enough. There's some cool one-liners in there. There's some very noirish, and we'll get into that, dialogue. So the writing isn't bad. It's not stellar, but it's not bad. So it gave you one of the greatest one-liners in all of the 1980s. It's solid, especially for the kind of movie that this is or was trying to be, and we're going to get more into that later. And the acting, well, come on, you got some great people in this. You got Eastwood and you got Locke. Hell, you got a party right there. You got Pat Hingle, who's been in other Eastwood flicks, who's a really, really good actor. And you have some solid acting and some solid portrayals in this. There are a couple of exceptions. Let's be honest. The head baddie, the head psycho crazy guy is so fucking far over the top that it's almost like a comic rendering. It isn't like the brilliant Scorpio performance we got in the first one. It is just that kind of to the point like this guy couldn't function 3 minutes in logical society without being locked up in a loony bin somewhere. So that kind of shit was a little bit heavy. In the Ray character, she's so over the top, insanely loud, and over the. There are cartoon character performances in this, and then there's like solid performances in this. So the acting is a bit of a mixed bag. Some of it fine, some of it forced. It is what it is. You gotta take the good with the bad. Okay, why does this motion picture work? Well, it delivered on the vibe it was supposed to deliver on in the time it was supposed to deliver on. Okay, I'm going to give you the good and the bad kind of all rolled in once. I'm just going to fly this all out there. This is a Dirty Harry movie with a very 1980s feel. Meaning everything is amplified. Everything is overdone. Everything is in excess. I mean, we're not 8 minutes into the movie and he's already killed like 9 people, 10 people in 2 days. I mean, it's like, what? Everything was just amplified. If you watch the original Dirty Harry movie, if you watch like Magnum Force or something like that, everything is at a much more measured pace. This motion picture is just action after action after action after action after action, and it has a very 80s feel. Now, if you have a character that originated in the 80s, that kind of thing flows a little bit better. It's like, Cobra. Cobra's ridiculous, and it's just a nod to Dirty Harry anyway. But it's an 80s character in an 80s movie, so you don't question it as much. Clint Eastwood playing Dirty Harry is a 70s character, now transformed into an 80s era. Meaning, where it used to be a little bit more gritty and dirty, and at least based kind of semi around reality, or at least feeling real, by the time you hit it here, you're just like, well, they've Cobra'd my Harry Callahan. They have taken him and they have made him into this guy who at least 3 times a day is in a shootout with somebody. Has killed somebody who is now being yelled at by the brass of the office for the 58th fucking time that month about, hey, Harry, you got to slow down on the killing of people. Hey, Harry, you got to read people their rights on occasion. Hey, Harry. The stuff you've seen in all the other movies that now it's almost cliched, like you're waiting for it. You're waiting for them to say, oh, Harry, you got to sometimes obey the law and do these Miranda rights things, dude. You know it's coming. Now, there was a big gap between the third flick and this, the fourth flick. So maybe they thought people wouldn't really remember. But if you were a fan of the first movie, the second, and or the third, you would realize that this is a strange upping the ante in the old Dirty Harry franchise. Okay, yes, in the third movie, he took on terrorists and he took them out with a rocket at the end. But they did it in a slightly slick way where you're like, okay, I can handle it. I'm not going to go too far over the edge and start shitting on this. Yeah, it was a little over the top, but not that bad. I could see how this kind of worked out. And after that one, if you notice, they didn't make another one for forever. It's because I think they kind of ran out of places to go until you had Sudden Impact in 1983. Another thing about this motion picture is that it doesn't feel like it knows what it wants to be. I mean, this movie feels like a 1940s noir flick half the time. Anytime you see Sondra Locke in it, the lighting almost changes. The sound almost changes. The score almost changes. And it feels like you're watching this old noir detective flick from 50 years prior. And that kind of works. And it feels good. And it flows good. And then they just took all these action scenes and would just chug them in there at points, especially in the first 45 minutes of this movie. They front-loaded it really heavy with the action in the beginning of this flick. I mean, he's chasing people on tricycles. He's shooting gangsters. He's taking out criminals in stores. Punks are trying to take him, so he kills that. I mean, he's on a fucking rash of taking people out in the first 30, 35 minutes of this motion picture. Like, Jesus Christ, what is going on? And they 85'd your 70s character. So there's this contradiction in this motion picture. This great noir vibe that's going on, mixed in with this 80s action shit heaved into it together. It always, to me, felt a little bit unbalanced. I know I'm going to catch shit for this. I know everybody likes Sudden Impact. I know it's one of the Dirty Harry movies that everybody reflects back on. But compared to the vibe and the feel, especially the first and second, it's just really off-tempo. Always was for me. Always felt like it was a little bit out of place. I always felt like when they did that shit with the Death Wish movies, where you had the Paul Kersey character in the first one, and by like the fourth and fifth and whatever the hell it is, and that's another thing, by the way, the guns always get more ridiculous as the movie gets more ridiculous. You know what I mean? Death Wish, he had like a little teeny revolver in his hand, he's doing what he's doing. By the time he's on like the fourth, fifth one, he's got rockets, he's got giant, I mean, it's fucking craziness taking place. Then this one, they couldn't even keep old Dirty Harry's model fucking 29 or whatever. He's got this auto mag and he's running around looking like a lunatic. And you're like, what? Stop. You don't need to do this. You don't need to go that far. And shockingly, I didn't think the soundtrack, it was another Lalo Schifrin soundtrack, don't get me wrong, was one of the better Dirty Harry soundtracks. There was nods to the original Dirty Harry. Now, where you hear some of that music, you go, oh, that's it. That's it. And then there'd be parts of it where you're like, it looks like he got even a little scared by the 80s and started 80ing up his soundtrack. Just throwing it out there. And finally, I'm going to add one little thing. Maybe I'm completely off base. It's possible. The magic of the Eastwood Locke thing didn't really feel that great in this motion picture. I don't know if maybe they're having personal problems by that time. Probably. Maybe they just thought, how are we going to save this motion picture? Possibly. But it didn't have that kind of spark that those two characters had together in movies like The Gauntlet, or even Every Which Way But Loose. It just, I don't know if it was working. Locke actually was really good in this. Her last speech at the end of it about victims and their rights and all that kind of stuff, you're like, damn, she's playing this good. Damn, she's playing this good. And Eastwood always does his solid performance. But it almost felt like they were trying to take this movie that they knew was just a little bit too much and deal with what they had at hand. Again, I'm not crapping all over Sudden Impact. It's not nearly as bad as the Deadpool, which was totally a sinful piece of shit and almost offends me that it was ever even made. But it's nowhere on the level of the first two. It's just not. It can kind of hang with the third. Maybe. But it's just a different feel and a different vibe in a different decade with a different sensibility to how that character should be played. We needed more of Eastwood feeling like the loner, feeling like, a little bit more of him as a person, instead of just him running around just shooting everybody that takes 2 steps in front of him or whatever the hell is taking place. They left out the subtleties and went for the spotlight of what that character is. I just always felt it left this movie a little lacking. Anyway, be good. Take care. Stay out of trouble. Be kind to a stranger. Be there for a friend. And above all else, never, and I mean ever, take any bullshit from anybody. See y'all soon.